That is if I'm a student or I'm a, how would you say it, a transient worker. I'm somebody who, I don't have my own computer. I put my stuff on a stick drive or a little hard drive, and I go to the library and use their machine. And then I go to my friend's house and use his machine. And then I go home and maybe I have a machine there. And on that hard drive are all my images and my Lightroom catalog. Well, your presets are usually stored in your operating system, in the Adobe, there's like a folder for Adobe stuff. But if you click this on, now those presets that you might create in the develop module and other areas are going to be saved right in the catalog file. So if you move your hard drive with your images and everything in the catalog with you, you're bringing your presets with you. Also, when you leave another computer, you're not going to necessarily leave your presets behind for other people to use that might use that computer next. So that could be cool. If you need to copy those presets and put them on a different machine because you want them both at home and at work, here you can show your Lightroom presets folder. And if you click in there and find that particular folder, any presets you happen to have saved in there, you can copy, go home and hit the same button, copy them to the same location. Then we can resort any kind of defaults that we might run across in case we messed them up by clicking these various buttons. Go over here, we have external editing, and this means if I open an image from Lightroom in Photoshop, usually that's done by going to the Edit menu, the Photo menu, and there's a choice called Edit In, and that's where you can tell it to go to Photoshop. It wants to know what file format should it save the end result in. I used to use Photoshop file format for all of those things, mainly as a management technique for my hard drive. That way, if I ever saw the file extension PSD, which is Photoshop file extension, then I would only use that file extension when I had layers in my image. And just by glancing on my hard drive at a list of files, I could tell you which ones have layers and which ones don't. And I would only use TIFF for images that don't have layers that I made in Photoshop. And that way I could always glance at a folder, I'd see the PSDs, and I go, hey, those have layers. I'd see the TIFFs, and I'd say those don't. It was just a way I managed things. But then there are some things that are more efficient in a TIFF file and more compatible in a TIFF file. So let's mention that briefly. First off, when you use Photoshop file format, if you ever save something from Photoshop and it asks you if you want to maximize compatibility, you've probably saved a file before from Photoshop, and this little dialog box pops up with a checkbox saying maximize compatibility. You need to have that checkbox turned on when you save in Photoshop file format in order to have the image be able to show up in Lightroom. In general, what it's going to do is save a flattened version of your picture along with a layered version. And Lightroom will only read the flattened version to say this is what the image looks like. If that's not in there, then Lightroom doesn't know how to display that image. So that's one thing. With TIFF, you don't have to worry about that. TIFF can be a little bit more efficient in the way it saves the image, and you can also have compression in a TIFF file that will make the file smaller. And Photoshop, if you do that HDR effect I showed you, where you use Photoshop to do the merging, and then you save the image, it needs to be in TIFF format. If you have the HDR image you're going to process in Lightroom, it needs to be in TIFF format. So it's not bad to use TIFF here. And then finally, I think the Photoshop file format has and I could be wrong with this, a 4 GB file size limit. You might think that you'd never run into that. I've run into it multiple times. I have massive panoramas. I also have multi-layered images that might have 160 layers that are, really high resolution images to create complex things, and I can run into it. And there's a larger limitation on the TIFF file. I can get them saved as TIFFs. So that's why I have this set to TIFF instead of Photoshop. If you have a good reason to use Photoshop, go for it. I used that for a long time, but I've now switched to TIFF. The color space is going to determine how saturated the colors can become in your picture. sRGB will be the most limited, but is needed for the internet and needed for a lot of service bureaus that print their images. So you'll have to see what you use your pictures for. You might want that. If you print on your own printer sitting on your desk, Adobe RG is a pretty good choice. In ProPhoto, I'd only use if you really know what it means and you know why you're using it.